Hey folks, your
Absolute Packer podcast initiating in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello out there, Absolute Packer podcast fans, and welcome to episode 19 of the Absolute Packer podcast, where today we're going to recap the Packers versus the Lions, which should be pretty brief. And then we're going to get into As the Packers World Turns, soap operas. As there's been, after the Lions game, there was an absolute flurry of activity with the front office, coaching staff, rumor mill. Big changes are coming. So we'll obviously get to that after we recount or go back and at least glance over the Lions game. But wow, lots of changes in store and not a shortage of topics to discuss.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm curious, like, if any of this would have happened if Rodgers wouldn't have gotten
That's the
hurt.
$1 million question. I said the exact same thing. I tend to think no.
Yeah, me too.
But that's easy to say. And like I said, I think we can kind of expand on that a little more. Maybe we knock out the lion stuff just to get it out of there. We're gluttons for punishment. So why don't we talk about a crappy game?
Yeah, I mostly blocked it from my memory.
You're a smart
week.
man. I've essentially done the same. It's funny is, or go ahead. Sorry.
No, so the only thing, and it actually bothers me even more, is that they came out of the gate with the onside kick.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And why aren't we doing these aggressive, statistically smart things when we have the number one player in the league actually playing on our team?
Well, in this game, we had nothing to lose. So they're like, what the hell? And I'm saying that as kind of tongue in cheek because, McCarthy's known to be aggressive. And it's like, if I were him, I would have thrown the freaking Statue of Liberty play in the Lions game. I would have thrown everything. I would have literally grabbed the kitchen sink out of the visitors' locker room and thrown that at the team,
Right.
But to your point, I think, that there's so many things that have been revealed throughout this season. And in a way, the Lions game, it ended in obviously a big fat thud. And there was a lot of things that it revealed and a lot of nasty, bad things that have happened throughout the season, were confirmed throughout the Lions game and even some worse things. But the short answer on that, in my opinion, when I saw it, I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. And then I was quickly reminded, I'm like, wait a minute, this game doesn't mean anything. It's like, so I think they did it just because there's nothing on the line,
Which to me
is Bush League.
speaks. Well, yeah, it speaks volumes for like the way that like playing to not.
That's a
lose
loser's
is not
mentality, as
saying-
McCarthy loves to say. It's one of McCarthyisms,
Well, which makes me crazy because like you got to play to
Exactly.
win. You don't play to not lose. You play
No
to
doubt.
win.
And I can operate into that in terms of the X's and O's for the Lions game. But I made it. I think it's it's the last point here. But it's McCarthy wanted to win that game, and if anything, it was for his own record. Because I'll tell you what, finishing the season at 500 at 8-8 looks way better than 7-9. Those are eons apart from each other because one's the difference between a losing season and one's the difference between basically a push. And so the fact that, and I made a note here too, that the game felt like 58-0, even though it was 35-11. But look, I'll just pop through the bullet points here. You can stop if you want to interject anything or pour salt in the wound or anything, all the above.
No, go through. Quick.
In this, I said, alas, after the onside kick, nothing happened. So yeah, it was like the onside kick was really cool. And then Brett Hundley happened. And then basically the entire team started to quit. The defense flat out quit. And do I blame them? Yes and no. But, if you quit on your coach, your head coach, it's a bad look. And I think some players, in particular, HaHa Clinton Dix, I don't know how much you saw of HaHa Clinton Dix, how much you paid attention to him, specifically throughout the year, but I don't know what the hell happened to this guy. It's a staggering regression because he was a Pro Bowl player last year. Now, was it more of a popularity contest? Sure, but he was a very good player last year. I don't know about Pro Bowl, but he was very good. He was horrific this year. He was a fringe NFL player. And unless he was hurt, I have no explanation for it unless he completely checked out of Dom Capers' scheme and just said, to hell with this shit. I don't want to get myself hurt, so I'm just not going to try hard, which maybe that is true. But even McCarthy called him out in his presser, McCarthy's end of season presser, saying, haha, Clinton Dix needs to, take care of his own, what do you say, like clean up his own house or whatever. So these are just bad looks. And there was one play in particular in this game. Oh my God, it's going to be replayed over and over in my head. And it was, again, it's a game that meant nothing, but it was near the goal line. Haha, Clinton Dix is kind of jogging in, and he could have smashed the guy right at the goal line. Instead, he literally ran past the guy out of bounds. It was the quintessential, I'm mailing it in. And after that, that would have been a benchable offense, in my opinion. I would have said, get your ass out of this game. You're sitting on the bench. You're done. Right. I mean, it was pathetic.
Well, I mean, we have other players that we want to let them get a chance. At that point.
Yeah, we got to get these undrafted rookies out there. These. but
really, I mean, and I would have done that even more. I mean, like we didn't ever start. Like basically, we didn't have most of our starters. On
I mean, they did hold out a lot of guys. So
I would have gone all in on that. Like, who cares if it's if you're going to lose the game anyway?
And I bet you McCarthy thought there was a decent chance, the game could be won. But what he did not count on, and I didn't either, is the team basically quit on him. And again, that's not a good look. So after an ending like that, I mean, this is where I think we'll kind of end this game, if you will. Big changes were in store, and they didn't waste much time. I think, we kind of go right into it here. There's been such a flurry of activity the past week. It has been hard to keep up. And I mean, I'm really checked into the Packers, as you know, social media, beat writers, the whole 9 yards. I subscribe to Bob McGinn's column. I spent money on that, which kind of goes to show you how crazy of a fan I am. I spend money on a Packers account, but he's the best. And the amount of stuff that was going on out there, it's for a while, a couple of days there, up until probably 3 days ago, it looked really dysfunctional. I mean, we looked like, not only did the product on the field look like the Cleveland Browns, behind the scenes, we kind of looked like the Cleveland Browns. And so, you made a comment earlier. I don't know if this was right when we talked in the podcast or it was notes before we actually got on, but the $1 million question is, had Rodgers not gotten hurt, would all this have happened? And I thought about that a lot. And I tend to think that had he not gotten hurt and we had a winning record go to the playoffs, nothing changes. I really do. And I think it was almost like he became a martyr, that this had to happen to reveal how, not dysfunctional, it's not the right word, but how, number one, how poorly the roster was constructed and how poorly the players and even some of the coaches felt about other coaches and about the regime in general. I mean, Dom Capers, yuck. I mean, you know how I feel about him, but some of the dysfunction, there was dysfunction on that. I mean, you have 10 guys on the field, you have guys giving up wide open touchdowns, miscommunication. It was a mess. So what I thought I might do here, unless you want to pop in, is, I'll kind of run down, I got it bulleted, kind of as best I could, looking back over some of my notes in real time, what essentially happened after the loss, and, first and foremost, Dom Capers, whose job security was tenuous at best, I say, was fired a few days after the Detroit loss. I mean, that was a foregone conclusion. I was really going to be surprised if they didn't let him go. The only thing I'll say about that was, when they interviewed Capers and asked about his job status right after the loss, he made no indication that he was going to retire. So he was fired. He wasn't, he didn't retire. He was fired. And there's a clear distinction there. He wants to keep coaching, and God bless him. But man, this league has passed him by. I firmly believe it. So, to this day, and we're recording this on January 8th at about 5 p.m., we still don't have a defensive coordinator to replace him, which is fine. They're vetting out candidates. And unfortunately, a lot of what they're vetting out is internal hires with the leftover remnants of Capers' regime, which I think would be a huge mistake. But, there are some guys that are, that they're in the running for it. So they're also looking at, I believe, Vic Fangio, who's the DC of the since let go John Fox regime in Chicago, and he's highly thought of, but he's also an older guy. He's a 3-4 guy, but I'd like to get some young blood in there from outside. But we'll have to kind of see how this plays out. So, Yeah, and then this is
So the only thing that I guess I would kind of add about the Dom Capers thing is I'll really be pissed off if he does go somewhere else and he
succeeds
and he has a great season.
And I mean that's a good point. If that does happen, that will be such an indictment on Ted Thompson and potentially Mike McCarthy in some regard, more so on Thompson, obviously, but.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. I mean, you don't want. I mean, look at Micah Hyde and Casey Hayward get let go, and the guys are freaking Pro Bowlers. That's not a good look for Dom Capers, Mike McCarthy, or Ted Thompson. So, you got to think that those guys, once they see that too, they're like, hey, something's wrong here. Something's very wrong. So I'll give him credit for making the change there. But the biggest stunner, and I did not see this coming. I mean, I told everybody was asking after the season's over, like, what do you think's going to happen with Thompson and blah, blah. And I was kind of like, I think they're going to get Mike McCarthy are going to get long-term extensions. They need to have yada, yada. And then a stunning development. It basically came out. Mark Murphy revealed that Ted Thompson was out as GM, and he was basically going to be reassigned to essentially kind of like a consultant / head scout for the Packers moving forward. That blew me away. I did not see it coming. And, and where some of this came from, it's kind of hopped into the next bullet point is, I mean, rumors swirled that Ted Thompson was aloof, that maybe not all of his faculties, health-wise were there, as they say. And I have a note here. There were, anonymous sources, reports that members of the board of directors were basically talking to Mark Murphy saying, what the hell's wrong with this guy? There's something going on here with him. He's not all there, And like I said in past podcasts, where sometimes, when every time they show Ted Thompson on the TV or whatnot, he looked like a guy who had escaped from the home. And he didn't know where he was. And apparently there was truth to this, which, and I don't want to disparage if he's got health issues, shame on me for saying, talking like that. But at the same time, shame on the Packers for not, pulling this trigger earlier. So it's just that those developments to me were stunning. What did you think about all that?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just time for a change. I was a big believer in Ted Thompson forever.
I was too. I was too.
The whole draft and develop, but then you have to develop and you have to, and I think the drafting was done mostly well, but the developing wasn't necessarily done well. And there's probably lots of factors to that.
Developing would say it's the coaching.
Yeah. So the thing now, I mean, so if he's going to be doing scouting, then he's doing the drafting part anyway. Like, I feel like that's probably still okay for him to do that. What I worry about, though, is any of the parts that he wasn't doing well with, if he's going to be sticking his nose into that stuff. It's like I said, that whenever a founder of a business wants to kind of take a step back and let somebody else be president of the company, and that is usually rough. That's a disaster.
And then because they usually want to come in and meddle, and they can't hand their baby off, so to speak.
Yeah. So I just hope there's nothing for good or bad, hopefully he was part of the problem and we can move on with somebody else that can fix it. And then also he doesn't meddle.
Yeah. We're going to have to kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, like you said, by and large, I agree completely with the core of your team has to be draft and develop. It cannot be free agents. It cannot be trades and all that. I mean, anybody who says differently is stupid. Because the league and the structure and rosters just aren't set up to be that way. You should augment through free agency and look at trades and kind of churn the bottom of your roster, I think. But obviously, Ted was, and it seems that right after the Super Bowl in 2010, right after the Super Bowl win, his drafts all went downhill. On the surface, it seems that way. Again, where's coaching end and where does he begin and vice versa? Who knows? But, he hit so many home runs in free agency too, prior to the Super Bowl. And then when the Super Bowl, it careened downhill with the lack of difference makers. I mean, when you look at this team, the lack of difference makers outside of Aaron Rodgers is staggering. There's guys, there's pretty good players, but give me a guy on the team outside of Aaron Rodgers, either side of the ball, where opposing teams have to game plan around. It's not there, and it's a big problem, And people who claim that Clay Matthews you have to game plan around, you don't. I hate to burst your bubble.
Not anymore.
And it's been that way for 3 years. Mike Daniels, he's good, but he's not that good.
Yep. Same deal.
I mean, HaHa Clinton Dix, well, last year maybe, but he blew up this year. And then outside of that, I mean, Nick Perry, give me a break. There's nobody you have to game plan. And even on offense, it's outside of Rodgers. It's not the wide receivers. They have no tight end. So there's a dearth of difference makers. There's a lot of work to be done. So when Mike McCarthy finally did his season-ending press conference, I listened to the whole thing live, and then I kind of live followed Twitter too to see what people are saying too. And the thing I took from it was a blatant passive aggressive plea on McCarthy's behalf to the front office to find a GM with a win now mentality. The Ted Thompson way was failing, and McCarthy was, and there'd been rumors about this for the better part of 3 or 4 years, that he was sick and tired of being, saddled with inferior talent and a dearth of impact free agents and not getting anything from his high draft picks and basically promoting people from the practice squad when people got hurt. So that was Mike McCarthy goes, this isn't a power play, to quote him from the presser, and this is in the best interest of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, it was some self-preservation, no doubt, and it was a plea, and I mean, you can't blame him. So, I mean, what have you heard any of his presser, live, or did you get any feedback from any of that, or what? I'm curious what your thoughts are on how McCarthy kind of played that out, if you got any.
Nah, so I didn't watch it live. Okay. I mean, I didn't see the recording of it. I should have. I did not.
That's okay.
So I just saw little notes here and there. I don't know. I mean, your summary is about kind of how I feel. I mean, I think he's trying to be excited about the changes, but not too excited. That kind of stuff. And at
this time when McCarthy did his presser, the thing that was coming out, this is when the rumor mill and the anonymous sources and Bob McGinn's and the other beat writers with the Packers News and even some national outlets started to kind of look in to see who could be on the docket for the next GM and all this, that, or the other. And the rumor mill and supporting from Bob McGinn seemed to point to the fact that Mark Murphy was I'm going to say strongly considering Russ Ball as the next GM. And for those who don't know who Russ Ball is, he's been with the team for a long time, and he's known McCarthy for a long time, but he's also kind of morphed into Ted Thompson's right-hand man in a front office capacity. I'd say a lot of people said, he's a bean counter. He's an accountant. He does handle a lot of contracts, and that's part of his job description, so to speak. And he's not a complete, I'd say, a bean counter. He was a strength and conditioning coach. He did play football. He has gotten involved in some scouting. But if you look at who he is versus the other available candidates, both internally and externally, he would have been a massive departure from what I'm going to call the Ron Wolf tree of GMs. And when I say that, basically, ever since Ron Wolf came in and Bob Harlan hired him, the GM, and this kind of permeated throughout the league, not just Green Bay, but so in 1992, or was it 91? Might have been 91. GMs, Harlan and both Wolf, they took the model that a GM needed to be a scout. He needed to understand, the college game and what to look for, and not be, a delegator and more, of like an in-house office guy, so to speak, or on the financial side. He needed to understand and capture talent, a scout. So all the GMs that have come through Green Bay since Wolf, to include him, to include Ron Wolf himself, have basically been of a scout nature. So, Ted Thompson was hired, I want to say in the early 90s by Ron Wolf too, and he became a scout. Ron Wolf's son, Elliot, who's still with the Packers and was a candidate for the GM, he has a scouting background. Brian Gutekunst, who was actually named GM, has a scouting background. Everybody who was involved in that, to include some of the outside candidates. John Schneider, who was the one they wanted to aggressively go after from Seattle, used to be with the Packers, and he's actually a native of De Pere, Wisconsin, which is interesting. They all had scouting backgrounds. Russ Ball primarily did not. And there was a big, so going back to McCarthy being, kind of passive aggressive, what I took was, he didn't want Russ Ball. And the rumor mill was, McCarthy was not a fan of it because he thought it would be more of the same from in terms of an approach from Ted, because he was Ted's right-hand man, and he didn't quite know talent. So a lot of people, and myself included, to be honest, as a fan part, was like, I don't know if that's the right move. And all signs were pointing that way, but it didn't actually go that way. So people probably heard the name Russ Ball more times in the past 4 days than they had in the past 8 years. They got
for sure.
And I did a post on the Absolute Packer podcast Facebook page of an article that kind of talked about who he was. It was a behind the scenes look last year into getting a flavor for what he did, and it was kind of how he negotiated contracts and all that. But as it turns out, he wasn't the guy. He's still going to be involved with the team moving forward, but it ended up being Brian Gutekunst. So I don't want to get too far in front of that, but I don't know how much you know about Russ Ball or your thoughts on the structure
Nothing.
and how that went.
Nothing. I didn't know anything about him till this.
Yeah, and I mean, again, they say bean counter. That's not entirely accurate. He did a lot of contract stuff, but he did not have a scouting background, and that would have been a huge departure. And I don't think it would have been the right one. I really don't. So I'm glad they went with somebody who had a scout moniker, because you have to be a guy who can identify and capture talent. That has to be everything of what you're about as your core principles and everything you do. That's just the way. That's the best chance of success in this league, and it's been proven league wide time and time again. So. And then the rumor mill continued to swirl that not only was Mike McCarthy not a fan of Russ Ball, but Aaron Rodgers was not thrilled about the prospect of Russ Ball. And I'm going, holy crap, this is not looking good. Mark Murphy's on one page, these other guys are on another. But, and these, the sources of some of these, you could say, well, are they anonymous or what? Let me put it this way. So Bob McGinn was the source he was a longtime Packers beat writer for the Journal Sentinel and Packers News. Like I said, I subscribed to his new, he left the Journal Sentinel / Packers News last year, but he was on the beat for almost 40 years. His Rolodex of, contacts is massive, and he knows what he's talking about. So the rumor about Russ Ball and McCarthy not getting along originated from Bob McGinn. And then on top of that, the Aaron Rodgers part of it, Jason Wilde he's a beat writer, and he's been, he's with ESPN Milwaukee, and I think he used to be with ESPN Madison or Madison State Journal or something like that, doing sports since the first Super Bowl in 1996. So he's got about 20 years. And he had a radio show with Aaron Rodgers for about 5 years. I used to listen to it all the time. It was really good. So he knows Rodgers, more than just an acquaintance. And Jason Wilde was the one who came out publicly and said, Aaron Rodgers isn't a fan of Russ Ball. So all these things are like coming to a head, and I'm going, what the hell is going on here? But again, go ahead.
I hear you talk about that stuff, and I get concerned when we are
when it sounds like TMZ.
Well, I mean, okay, so yeah, I get concerned when it feels like there's drama at all. But I mean, it makes me really nervous when I hear anything about our quarterback's opinions on things that are kind of above his pay grade.
I completely agree. And that goes back to, I assume go ahead. Sorry.
No. it makes me so uncomfortable to even say that, because I know what that sounds like. I don't realize he's probably the greatest player that will ever be on this team.
But you can't have the inmates running the asylum and doing and running it and choosing the direction of a franchise, because that sounds like somebody we used to know was the quarterback.
That's what I'm getting at. That's exactly right.
You can't let the inmates run the asylum. I completely agree with that. So it was just for a team that's had so much continuity and lack of change. It had obviously a malaise had struck over. I'm not going to disagree with that, but to have all this stuff come to a head in basically the period of like 5 days was just like, I believe it was like information overload. And you're like, the cracks in the foundation of this thing were way bigger than we thought, and so it was just odd. And a lot of it turned out to be, not true, I guess, as it turns out. So I'll keep kind of going through the real time, things of what's going on here and just keep commenting on really. But meanwhile, 19-year veteran scout Alonzo Highsmith left for a position with new GM John Dorsey, the Cleveland Browns. So for those who don't know who John Dorsey is, he used to be with the Packers as well. He left about 6 years ago, and he became the general manager of the Chiefs. He was fired last year for, I don't even know why he was fired. It's kind of stupid. With Andy Reid's the head coach, it sounded like a power play there. Mm-hmm. And the Chiefs improved a lot. They were crap before he got there, and it improved a lot. And I would say that's a product of John Dorsey and Andy Reid. But he was sitting out there, with no team. And, he ended up taking the Browns gig, I want to say early December. And going back to, I had mentioned the lead-in was Alonzo Highsmith, and he's a scout that's been around for the Packers, like I said, almost 20 years. And just for those who don't know him, he used to be a football player, a college football player. I don't know if he ever made it to the NFL. Became a boxer, from what I understand. But he discovered, get this, he is the scout who specifically found and targeted Donald Driver. So he found him basically, and he also found Sam Shields. Two guys who went on to have prolific careers with the Packers, both won a Super Bowl in 2010. So the guy was very good. And he himself found those two players, those kind of diamonds in the rough. I mean, Donald Driver was a 7th round pick. He wasn't a 1st round pick, Sam Shields was undrafted, so it's a credit to him, but he left. So there's exodus of scouting talent too. And he went, to go again, join John Dorsey with the Cleveland Browns, and best of luck to him. But I mentioned John Dorsey too because if you put a gun to my head, who would have been the best candidate for this whole thing? It would have been Dorsey. And the fact that it comes out in this whole process that it sounds like Mark Murphy and other higher ups, and even the board of directors, and I would have to assume even McCarthy in some regard, and even Russ Ball, will say, the guys up over there knew for months, plural, that Ted Thompson was going to step aside and he was going to go into something else and they need to make a change. How they didn't aggressively go after John Dorsey and get him is kind of a mystery. And I mean, the short answer is they didn't want to look stupid and look like, and throw some curveball out there and say, oh, by the way, really quick, we're going to go get Dorsey, and Ted's stepping aside. So I think there's a little bit of a hubris there. That's my own opinion. I think Dorsey would have been a really good fit. He's young. I think he's a little bit older than Gutekunst, who's a new general manager, but he's proven. Gutekunst isn't proven. John Dorsey is proven. So that was just an odd dynamic too. The succession planning looked very hasty and thrown together with this whole thing.
Yeah.
But who knows?
I mean, so if you think, I'm going to try to be devil's advocate. I don't know that I disagree with you, but maybe this kind of goes into the draft and develop kind of idea. Like maybe not that like you want to take somebody who's green, but like you have to start somewhere. And if they really felt like it was his time, why not? I don't know enough about any of these individuals to make a really qualified decision. Hopefully it's the right one.
Sure.
But I don't know.
Yeah, let's put it this way. We're doing a grassroots podcast. We're fans, and we like the Packers, and we're interested in more than what's on just the top surface layer. But are we connected into anonymous sources, and are we beat reporters? Hell no. So we get our news and our information from sources that other people do. The lay fan does. I consume it a little more detail and follow it a little more closely. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a lot of what we're doing is we're inferring a lot, but I think like anything, the truth lies somewhere in between. And that's typically what I say, where is it way over on this side or is it way over on the other side? It's usually in the middle. So is it haphazard succession planning and just kind of seems like they didn't have their shit together? Maybe not that far, but I guess we'll have to wait and see is the best thing I can say.
Exactly.
But it was just an odd look, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, quickly going on to the next bullet here, Murphy did try to get access to some outside candidates. The three lead internal candidates, I should say, were Elliot Wolf, Russ Ball, and Brian Gutekunst. We've gone into detail about Russ Ball, but I'll go into detail about the others. I mean, Elliot Wolf, everybody knows he's Ron Wolf's son. The name, the pedigree, and he's a smart. Obviously, they kind of say he's a wunderkind, if you will, and he's young. He's 35. He would have been probably the youngest general manager in the league. And he's had interviews for open GM positions the past couple of years, but the Packers have blocked him and they wanted to retain him. But just to kind of let people know what he's been doing the past few years internally, he's in charge of the pro personnel side. So when I say that, that's basically responsible for knowing the players that are already in the NFL and other teams. He's not responsible for any college scouting or anything like that. Basically, he was in charge of bringing things to Ted where Ted would throw them away and not do anything.
So it's hard to know how good he was.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a good point. I mean, and his dad, I'm sure him and his dad are close. Ron Wolf still has a home in Green Bay and he hangs out a lot. And, Ted Thompson was a protege of Ron Wolf. So they all kind of know each other. But he's young, and so Brian Gutekunst, the guy who ended up getting the GM position, I think he's 44, which is still young. I mean, he's 10 years older, damn near, than Elliot Wolf, but he's still young. But he has been a scout with the Packers in some regard, I want to say for 10 years, but he's been a scout or affiliated with NFL programs for the better part of almost 20 years. So he started in his 20s. And he was a scout for college ranks. So he is kind of the draft, responsible for bringing in the talent that isn't in the NFL yet, so to speak. So Elliott handled the pro personnel side. Gutekunst was the main guy on the college scouting side. So I got to think that what ultimately this came down to was, and again, I'm trying to read the tea leaves of other stuff too. I mean, McCarthy is in his mid 50s. So Gutekunst is 10 years younger than McCarthy. I mean, I can't see McCarthy taking orders from a guy 20 years is, you know what I mean? And it's a big risk with Wolf just because, again, how young he is. And he basically just has a name to him. He could be great. I think he will go on to be a GM, but that just kind of frames up who the internal candidates are. So moving real quick to the outside candidates, they tried to get an interview with Reggie McKenzie, who's the GM of the Oakland Raiders, used to be a scout for the Packers too, and he got denied. Or actually, they didn't get denied. Reggie McKenzie turned the request down. And this was after Gruden got this. John Gruden gets this huge contract. That's going to go over like a fart in church. I'm telling you. It's gonna be stupid. They paid a guy a coach $100 million for 10 years, but apparently Reggie McKenzie wanted to stick around, and he was okay with hanging around with Gruden, so God bless him. But John Schneider was the other big one, and for those who don't know who John Schneider was, he was a scout with the Packers too for about 5 or 6 years. He was a lead scout under Ted Thompson. He took the GM job with the Seattle Seahawks right after the Super Bowl win. It's either right after the Super Bowl win in 2010 or right before. And obviously, he did great things with Seattle. Now, he shares personnel decisions with Pete Carroll, who's the head coach over there. So who actually makes more of the decisions over there, it remains to be seen. But Schneider still has his footprint on that. And they came up with, obviously, a fantastic defense that for 5 years was the best in the league. Won a Super Bowl, went to 2 Super Bowls, which is more than Thompson and McCarthy did. They lost the other one to New England, but they went to 2. And he's a young guy too. I want to say he's in his mid to late 40s. And so he's a proven guy, and he's a De Pere native. He's from De Pere, Wisconsin. So they made a hard push for him, but the Seattle Seahawks denied him. I think for obvious reasons, they want to retain him too, but if you're a GM, it's tough to get an existing team. It's tough to get out of the contract to do what they call like a lateral move. What the Packers were trying to do in terms of interviewing Schneider was to say, hey, he would have total control in Green Bay where he's sharing responsibilities with Pete Carroll. Yeah. So he was the leading outside candidate, but it didn't happen. And the rumor has it out there that Schneider desperately wanted to come here, but he couldn't make it happen, couldn't get out of his contract. So again, that's just a rumor, but that kind of ship sailed.
I didn't pay attention to who a lot of the names were because if they were being blocked, it really didn't ultimately matter. But I saw that there were a lot of those.
Go ahead,
a lot of those going on. So there's somebody with
there was even somebody from the Vikings, but I paid more attention to Schneider because even if they got blocked, there is a way to get him. But what we would have had to have done was we would have had to have taken a big swing, and we would have had to give up potentially draft picks and pay cash to get him out of his contract. So it could have, if Mark Murphy really wanted him, they could have gotten him. But I tend to think it would have been a bit much. So so he ends up staying with Seattle, and
we don't know, and things have kind of fallen off a cliff with Seattle too. So
I'll say that their defense has gotten old, relatively speaking, and they've had some catastrophic injuries. 2 of their all-pro players may never play in the league again. I saw that a couple weeks ago. Cam Chancellor, their safety, might be done for his career, and Cliff Averill, edge rusher. So, I mean, like any team seems to have it pretty, outside of the Patriots, has a 3 to 4 year window, and they had theirs and they maximized most of it. And now they're kind of on the downside of it. So that's the way things, kind of churn in the NFL. Brian Gutekunst, it was announced yesterday on Sunday at probably about noon. And, a buddy of mine actually alerted to me before I could get it out and get it myself, but then I obviously posted it to the page. And I would say I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't see it happening, but I was glad they didn't choose, the fan of me was glad they didn't choose Russ Ball because, like I said, I wanted somebody who was a straight up scout. And I think that is the best direction to go. But, Gutekunst is unproven. He's a good scout. He's got a track record there, but as a GM and managing people, he's unproven. So, I mean, we're going to have to kind of wait and see how this goes. And, we'll see. And then, so as I'm sharing these notes with you earlier today, and so much stuff is happening. And then I have an update here in big capital letters that after the press conference today from Mark Murphy officially announcing Gutekunst as the GM, there was announced that there's a reporting structure change within the Packers that was very new. And I didn't see this coming. This was very interesting. And essentially, I'm paraphrasing here what Tom Silverstein, who's a beat reporter for the Packers News, basically said, in a departure from previous practice, the Packers will have Gutekunst, McCarthy, and Russ Ball all report to team president Mark Murphy. It means Gutekunst has control over the roster, but not the head coach. There are 7 or 8 other teams that do it this way. What's your first thought when you hear that?
Means that McCarthy wasn't happy with it.
I don't know if it's necessarily wasn't happy with it. I mean, that's an interesting take, and I think there may be some truth to it. What I take it there is almost more Murphy / McCarthy telling Gutekunst, look, you got to play nice with McCarthy for at least a year, at least,
yeah.
And that's my take. I mean, I could see both sides with what you say, and also, kind of what I thought. But this is but what it also points to, I'm kind of flying around, I apologize. But, and Murphy made some comments in the press conference, again, that delves more into, I'll say, I'm using air quotes, dysfunction that was behind there. But he said a lot of people were getting siloed. There was lack of communication on certain things. And you're going, wow. I mean, it must have been so bad that they had to kind of blow up the reporting structure. So Murphy, for those who, and I was one of the guys, I'm not a huge fan of him. He's been playing his little Titletown district sandbox the whole time while everybody else runs everything. And Murphy's done a 180 and he said, look, I'm going to get involved in the football side and people are going to report to me. And they said they're going to be meeting weekly. And, so this could either be seen as, an improvement in communication, or it could damn well be seen as too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know. We'll have to let it play out.
Yeah, I'm kind of afraid of the
latter.
Yeah,
I am too.
Like, not so many cooks in the kitchen, but like not clear lines of authority.
Yeah, exactly. You're dead right. I mean, if McCarthy likes something but Gutekunst doesn't, does Gutekunst go around McCarthy? And I mean, how does this power play work? Because there's something going on there. If it works, that's great. If they can make it work, but on the surface, you're going, huh?
Yeah, I mean, maybe with the particular personalities, they can make it work, but like in general, that sort of thing is, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's a bad idea or not. I mean, you're saying 7 or 8.
To me, it doesn't pass the smell test, as I like to say, but that's very early. Yeah. So,
I mean, you said 7 or 8 other teams do it. What are the 7 or 8 other teams?
I don't have those. Actually, Tom Silverstein was saying Mark Murphy basically stated that in the press conference. I don't know which teams do it, but some others do it.
Is it the Browns and the...
Is it the shitty teams or the good ones?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know. I mean, is it the Patriots? Probably not.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a good question. I would have to think it'd hopefully be the good ones. But if anything, I'm glad to see Murphy take more of I'll say an ownership of the football side, but there better be clear lines of who owns what and how things work. And I have to assume there are, but look, I think when you wrap all this stuff up and you take a step back, a lot of this plays off of, to me, and after hearing Brian Gutekunst in his presser too, they realize they got a window with Rodgers. They realize they got to get their act together and they got to try. And I tend to think that this next year, and I'm not saying this next couple years, I'm saying this next season, the 2018 season, is a Super Bowl or bust for McCarthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't make the Super Bowl, you're out.
Yep.
And I mean, is that pressure? Sure. But at the same time, McCarthy has done his part. And he said so much at his presser. He canned some coaches. He canned some offensive guys. He canned the defensive stuff, and he's rearranging some other things. So he's like, I'm doing my part. You guys got to do yours,
Right.
So
that's good. That's a good point. So when does Rodgers' contract come up?
He is under contract through the end of the 2019 season, so 2 more seasons. But you better bet your ass the number one priority of the entire regime right now is getting him a contract extension, I would say within the next 3 to 4 months. It has to be. And if it's not,
Yeah,
they are fools and morons.
pretty much.
If it doesn't happen, I say 3 to 4 months. If it doesn't happen in March or April, I won't be shocked. But if it doesn't happen by the end of training camp,
yeah. I mean, that's got to be.
I'd be very worried. I'd be very worried.
Yeah, and there could be a timing thing for maximum PR that they want to hit, but
yeah, and I mean the other thing I think it's worth noting is that people go, well, what if he just plays out his contract and leaves? And I go, well, you have to remember that the teams still hold all the leverage here because you know what they'll do? They don't want to do it, but they will franchise him, and you can franchise him year to year. You have to pay a lot of money. But if it comes down to that, you bet your sweet ass they're going to franchise him. If he's still playing well, I should say. If he's still playing well and up to, his elite level, they will franchise him.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you can do it year over year. So if it really gets to DEFCON 5, they'll franchise him.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's a game.
And when I say franchise, I mean franchise tag for those who don't know it.
So, I mean, it's a gamble either way, right? Because
I mean, we have him for 2 years under good terms.
Right.
Outside of that, if you franchise tag somebody, particularly an elite quarterback, that is not done under good terms under any circumstance. So if it gets to that, Rodgers ain't going to be happy. I don't care if he's getting franchised and he's making $30 million a year on the franchise tag. It's not a good situation to be in.
Right. I mean, we of course we want him. But it would suck to re-up the contract, make him obviously the highest paid player, and then have him get hurt again.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, there's this next. I'll say the next 6 months are going to be crazy. It's going to be very interesting. Grab your popcorn.
I know. I mean, I feel like there are really a lot of things to hash over. In this offseason for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, they're not screwing around. I mean, think about this. So just for perspective, Sean Payton was the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, right? Yeah. He was hired the same year McCarthy was, same tenure. Yeah. He had 2 straight seasons going 7-9 and missing the playoffs, and he didn't get fired. McCarthy has 1 7-9 season, and they're blowing up the damn 2/3 of the whole thing. Think about that.
Yeah. I mean,
that's crazy. That just goes to show you what the level of expectation, and in particular, does Rodgers drive that? Absolutely, but it's still.
So I think the Saints are amazing. I was rooting for them yesterday, and I hope they do what they got to do against the Vikings.
Exactly.
But they're not the Packers. Like, they haven't been as good for as long.
I will say this. I completely agree with you. But one thing the Saints have done, and they did it in basically one offseason. This is what the Packers will need to do. They had an outstanding draft. They drafted in the first round Marshawn Lattimore, that cornerback, who's probably going to be the defensive rookie of the year. He's a stud right away. Yeah. And that Alvin Kamara, the running back, they drafted him in the 3rd round. I mean, they hit the jackpot on 2 draft picks this past year, and it changed the whole team.
Yeah, they played phenomenally.
And the Packers need to do that. Yeah. 2 players change their whole fortune.
Yeah. Well, it changes the demeanor. If you have winners
no doubt
there instead of people who are mailing it in, like you said.
Yeah. Clinton Dix. We're talking about you.
If you got his number, we should have him on, because I would actually like to hear it, like his perspective. I would love to hear some of these.
I heard a couple comments you said, and basically, he protected at the end of the Lion game. I think they interviewed him, or it may have been the end of season presser with the team, the players, I should say. But he did say, I mean, he defended Capers and he took Thompson to task. He basically said, we didn't have the horses. Don was good, but we didn't have the horses. Meaning the players. It's obviously just a phrase. It's an NFL jargon, but McCarthy was having none of that. And, it's so again, where I don't know where Thompson begins and, Capers ends and stuff like that. To your point, if Capers goes somewhere, let's say he continues to coach, if he goes somewhere and has a great year, then Thompson sucks ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he goes somewhere and bombs, then Capers is more of the problem. Right now, again, I always like to say the truth is in the middle. It's probably some of Thompson and some of Capers.
Yeah, I think that is the case, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, to kind of rehash here, Brian Gutekunst is the new general manager of the Green Bay Packers, 44 years old. He has a good scouting pedigree. I think it was a pretty good hire. I heard him talk. He's Seems like a good dude, and I'm glad they went, a younger route. They didn't go Elliot Wolf, who's 35, but, they didn't. Russ Ball's like 58. He's only like 5 years younger than Ted Thompson. I wouldn't have been a huge fan of that either. So, going young, even if it is internal, I think it was the right way to go to get, and I will say this too. When I listened to Gutekunst's press conference, he did mention specifically that they're going to use all avenues of player acquisition. Which is basically saying, hint, hint, we're going to sign frickin' free agents.
Which is
and make trades.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. So it's good to hear. And that's, that's a very whirlwind look at what's happened in the past, we'll say, week or so. But exciting times ahead. So the next thing I got in here is JS comments.
Yeah, the two you picked out were great. I only added one more. Let it rip.
The one you had is good. Okay, so fans need to sober up for at least a day and demand a refund for all their non-voting stocks. There's not much I can add to that. It's just it's funny with JS comments. Like I said, there's elements of truth in everything that they put out. There's little sprinkles of truth, but then there's just ridiculousness in how they come across with it. So I'll kind of leave it at that. Now,
but you know what? Okay, so it is super interesting, and people outside of Green Bay have probably no idea. But like these people bought stock that's basically worthless.
Yep, it doesn't pay dividends.
So they don't make any profit. They don't get to vote. I mean, it's basically worthless stock.
I got one for Christmas. I didn't pay for it, but I do have it framed, and it's in my basement.
Yeah. And
so you're making fun of me too.
I mean,
I'm just kidding.
No, I get it. And
I'm giving you shit. I would never buy one myself. I wouldn't.
Well, I mean, I love these people who say, "Oh, I'm an owner." Like, I understand that, and they have a certain amount of pride, but they're not an owner. They have zero voice. They have less of a voice than we do right now.
No doubt.
And that's
no doubt.
And that is, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of criminal. Like, not to be political, but like that should not even be a thing. Anyway.
Yep.
All right. Next one.
Okay. One more piece of the evil empire to go. Listen to the bell, McCarthy, it tolls for thee.
That was my favorite.
That one's really good. They're not going to get their wish with McCarthy because when this JS comment post came out, it was before they announced McCarthy is going to stay on and all that. So, but I love the it tolls for thee. I mean, we're going back to what is that? Ernest Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Yeah. Well, I always think of Metallica, but
exactly.
But if we have another losing season, he's gone.
Well, that goes without saying. I'm telling you, Elliot, if they make the NFC Championship and don't go to the Super Bowl, I think he's out.
Yeah.
I do. This is Super Bowl or bust. Because I think, McCarthy's all in with what he's doing. Are the Packers going to go all in on what they're doing? I don't think they're going to go completely in. They're not going to rip up the entire future of the franchise for this, but they're going to do a heck of a lot more to help. And I'm telling you, if he doesn't make the Super Bowl, I think he gets canned. So that's my personal opinion, but we'll see.
I don't see that. I don't see that happening.
And if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again, I think that Lambeau Field will just disappear into a sinkhole in the earth.
I don't even. That's not something I should be laughing at.
I know.
You're right.
Yeah. Could you imagine?
Oh God!
I mean,
I can't. Yeah. I can't even imagine this time.
I know. No
I'm
doubt.
Still trying to get my mind.
Still trying to process it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are the Green Bay Browns without him, right?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully this makes everything better.
Yep.
Like, truly.
Now this next JS, this is outstanding. I got to say, this is one of the better ones I've seen. So this is talking about Brian Gutekunst. Bad name for a GM. Too ethnic. Hard to pronounce. Too hard to pronounce. By the way, I speak German. Do you know what Gutekunst means?
No, I don't.
What do you want to say? Verbatim, and just actual, it means in German, good art.
Good art. Okay.
Gute Kunst. I took 4 years of German in high school. When I saw it, I go, there you go. So we'll have to think of a nickname for him, and maybe we'll call him Good Art. That rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? But yeah, that's kind of funny. It is about as German as you can get, for Pete's sake.
I was trying to, I wish we could make it was a little more ambiguous, and we could make jokes about like it means Super Bowl or something.
Yeah, no, it literally means good art, like verbatim. Well, so there you go. I gave some people a foreign language lesson.
It doesn't mean I'll be able to pronounce it.
No doubt. I've heard people butcher it all over the place.
I'm sure.
Since I spoke German, it's easy, for me to remember. But
Gute Kunst.
I mean, if you want to really say it like as a German person would say it, and it's been a while, they would say, his name is Brian Gutekunst.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. Gutekunst.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not Gutekunst, it's Gutekunst.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think we'll hop into business and league stuff. And a nice little juicy piece of information came out that's kind of schadenfreude, but I love it.
I know.
The Patriots are apparently in shambles behind the scenes. So while the Packers, are trying to figure out what the hell is going on and get their own house in order, apparently the fevered egos over at the Patriots are out of control. And when I say the fevered egos, it is.
And how can they not be?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, is it surprising? No. But we're talking about Robert Kraft, the owner, right. Bill Belichick, the coach, and Tom Brady, the quarterback. Now, so just to frame this up, I think it was about 3-4 weeks ago, something like that. The 49ers traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. This is where it all comes about. And Jimmy Garoppolo was the backup to Tom Brady. He had done pretty good in spot relief.
He was good.
And he was good. And they got traded for a second-round pick, I think, went to the 49ers. The 49ers hadn't won a game. They were like 0-11. So he went to the 49ers, and he proceeded to win all the games he started when they put him in at 49ers. And he looks to be the real deal. I mean, he really does. He looks to be a damn good quarterback. I don't know what round they picked him in. I want to say he was a second or third round pick. But anyway, so word comes out, ESPN did some big juicy piece on this like 3 or 4 days ago, that apparently Tom Brady went to Robert Kraft and said, you need to trade Jimmy Garoppolo and get him the hell out of here because I'm going to play quarterback until I'm like 58 years old or something. And Bill Belichick, and Brady's 40 years old, playing great. He might be the MVP. He's playing great, no doubt. But Bill Belichick did not want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. He wanted to sign him to an extension. It came out he wanted to sign him to an extension, and he was going to basically think about dumping Brady. And that didn't happen. And so everybody's pissed at each other. Basically, there's a big power play going on, all yada, yada, yada. And the funny thing is, I guess Tom Brady, the other thing that came out is he has this fancy dancy trainer that, Tom Brady's big into like, again, he does a crazy diet, workout regimen, and all these other cockamamie things that he does that he's saying, this is going to help me play until I think he said he wants to play until he's 45, which it's all fine and dandy. But Bill Belichick's like, get your charlatan, trainer out of here, and he kicked him out of the facility. So that came out too. And it's just good to see the Patriots, to see this great organization. There's cracks, but as I say that, they're still the favorites to win the Super Bowl. And I could still see this galvanizing them to say, look, let's get this done. Let's win 6 rings, 6 goddamn rings, which is just, it's stunning. And 8 appearances. It's amazing. That is, the mind reels. And look, who are you picking right now to win the Super Bowl? The Patriots. Tell me I'm wrong.
I'm picking the Saints.
Really? Interesting.
I mean, I could be proven wrong this next week.
No doubt. But, I mean, right now they're the front runner. And, their defense sucked at the beginning of the year, the Patriots, but they turned it around. They're serviceable, and, Brady's playing great. He could be the MVP. Probably will be. They won 13 games, I think, went 13-3. I mean, they're a machine right now. So anyway, it was.
But so in out of those 3 people, the one that was correct, playing with the best intentions of the organization,
I know. His own owner was like, which is just Jesus.
Assuming that's all true, like the one that's playing,
they're all coming out saying, it's all a bunch of bullshit, blah, blah, which of course they're going to do. But I mean, there's got to be some truth to what's going on there. And but one thing I'll say about Jimmy Garoppolo, that quarterback, another thing that makes you go. So Brett Hundley spent 3 years in the Mike McCarthy quarterback school, as he called, and he couldn't tie his own shoelaces barely. So Bill Belichick, who's a defensive guy, gets Jimmy Garoppolo in there and turns him into the second Tom Brady, it almost looks like. And you're like, what the hell is going on? Mike McCarthy is not a quarterback guru. Aaron Rodgers is making these guys.
Yeah.
So
That's all there is.
That is all there is to say. I think we're good. If you want to talk about the phone number to call in, and
I do, and I actually was thinking about that. I want to get I'm going to try to get a different number.
You're tired of so many people calling.
No. Well, I think it'd be a little more memorable if it's a little more football centric. So I'm gonna change the letters. So I'm gonna get something different. But our current phone number, and it'll still work later too, is 508-535-5468. And call in, leave a voicemail, tell me I'm full of it. Whatever. Give us your thoughts. Tell us that we pronounce gute Kunst. Whatever.
Jawohl, mein Herr.
And that's all.
Nice. That's all I got too. So again, everybody, sit back, grab your popcorn, and just watch how everything unfolds. It's a very curious time.
Right, the off season will be better than the regular.
Yeah,
season.
That's sad but true. All right, go back up.
Podcast.
Chair.
I know, right?